Welcome to That1 Podcast. If you're ready to break free from the ordinary, this is where real stories of real game changers come to life. Are you ready to be that one? Welcome back to That1 Podcast. Your boy C-Rock here. I got Peter Young here with us today. And wait till you hear this story, guys. Like, this is some wild things that, like, you hear about and you want to go down the rabbit hole and hear more, because we don't see this every day. Although this stuff is going on every day. And, we want to get into this story. He's the best-selling author of his memoir, Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. And we're going to get into it today. Peter, welcome to the show.
C-Rock, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's been a while to get you on here. I wanted to get you on here right away when I met you. But we're good to go now. So tell us, man, like, I don't even know where to start with this story, because my mind's all over the place with it. But I guess like, let me just ask this. First of all, what's it like to be in a cult?
So it's a great question. I love the way you asked it, because I don't know, because no one ever knows they're in a cult. You only know you were in a cult. So when you're in the cult, you don't know it, because all cults at their core share undue manipulative mind control or brainwashing, whatever you want to call it. So everybody in the cult thinks they're in something else. No one ever thinks, I'm joining a cult. Hey, I'm in a cult. Do you want to join my cult? It's always something better, more sublime, you name it. It's only when you're lucky enough to get out do you realize, holy smokes, that was a cult. So I don't know if that answers your question. I mean, I could look back now and say, well, at the time I was married and our marriage was kind of dissolving, and it was really weird having to deal with this cult leader, but I didn't think it was a cult.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So what I would like to analyze then in that situation is, while you were in it, what were your thoughts, words, actions, and the people that you were surrounding yourself with like?
So I unwittingly married into it. So I married the love of my life, fell in love with this woman, but I knew she had this weird family guru, Uncle Robert, is what we called him. And so C-Rock, for years, I kind of thought the guy was nuts. Like, I was kind of hoping he would go away. But she loved, revered, adored the man. So did my in-laws at the time. And everything that came out of his mouth, they bought it hook, line, and sinker. And I was the guy that would ask questions. What do you mean about this? What do you mean about that? And then cult leaders hate when you ask questions. They don't want to be questioned. They just want you to blindly obey, right? And take their word for it. And so we would have these conferences. So we lived in Idaho and Montana. So my wife, my kids, and my in-laws. And this cult leader, Uncle Robert, lived in Southern California. So he would come up once or twice a year, and we'd have a conference. And we would sit around in the living room, listen to him talk for hours and hours. And it was crazy stuff. And I remember we would be taking notes, and I would look around the room, and I'd be like, do you believe this? Like, are you hearing this? Do you really believe what this guy is saying? And of course, everybody in the room, they did. And our cult was very small.
Wait a minute. So how did they address this to you, breach the topic of him coming and doing a conference with you?
Well, it was just understood that if he's going to come up to northern Idaho, where my in-laws lived, and we lived in either Montana or southern Idaho, we were coming and we were going to sit there and listen, because that's what you did with Uncle Robert. Like, in other words, everything that he did that you or me might be considered inappropriate, rude, presumptuous, whatever, was never addressed that way with Uncle Robert. He could kind of do and say whatever he wanted. And it was Uncle Robert, and you had to go along with it. So if there's a conference, we were going.
But what did they say that the conference was about? Like, and by the way, the conference was just in somebody's house and him talking?
It was in my in-laws' home, and it would be just him. And, he knew the Bible really well. So, like, it was his theology, his ideology. It was kind of his spin on Christianity. And
was he a pastor?
He did have a divinity degree, I believe, from way back in the 70s. That's where he met my former in-laws. It was at a seminary, like in the early 70s. So my wife,
he wasn't even related to them.
No, he wasn't related to any of us. He was born and raised in Syria. Not related at all. Short guy. I'm 6'5". He's like 5'6", olive complexion, bald, jet black hair, from Syria. And but he had this very parasitic relationship with my in-laws from, again, the early 70s. And just to show you how crazy some of these topics were, in, what was it? I think it was like 2015, we had a conference. And he starts going on. And you'll remember at the time, 2015, the big story was Clinton-Trump, right? The election, Hillary Clinton
Hmm.
versus Donald Trump. It's all over the news. And so we have this conference, and he starts going on and on about the hyena pack, I think it's the laughing hyena in Africa, and how the dominant individual in the hyena pack is the female. And after the female has given birth a few times, and this is a little gross, but I'm just going to tell you is what we talked about. The female hyena develops this fleshy appendage that looks like a penis. And so then the female hyena becomes the dominant entity, I guess, of this pack of the hyenas, and the males will be subservient and they will lick the groin of this female hyena, which is kind of disgusting, right? Well, he then used that analogy to describe what it would be like if Hillary Clinton became president and all of these figurative male leaders around the world would be figuratively licking Hillary Clinton's groin because she's got a figuratively bigger you-know-what than all the men. And it's, we can kind of laugh about it, but it's disgusting. And I had 3 kids under 10 in the room. And,
Oh my
and
gosh.
normally it'd be like, hey, pervert, be quiet. Because it was Uncle Robert, it was okay.
Wow, man. And did you find yourself buying into any of it at any point through the process?
Yeah, so, I was the proverbial frog in the pot of boiling water. I went
Yeah.
along to get along with my wife to save my marriage. And about 17 years into marriage, I finally caved. And I finally thought, maybe I'm missing something, right? See, like maybe my whole life, and I grew up in a Christian home, I had been baptized, I've been saved. Maybe I missed something elemental about the Christian faith. And I caved. And I would have been brainwashed for probably 2.5 years. And I was
Yeah.
all in. But even then when I was brainwashed, and I was, ashamed to admit it, but I was, it took a long time, I was never comfortable around him. I never knew what would come out his mouth next because I was often the object of his wrath. Because again, I was the one that asked the questions.
Yeah. This is why it's so important to study the word every day
Yeah.
and really get in and be educated on it so that you can have discernment. And people don't realize that. And by the way, there's levels to studying the word and really starting to understand it. But most people, you know what they don't do, Peter? This is a little bit different topic, but most people, when they read anything, they don't stop if they don't understand a word or a concept or a phrase. Right. They don't stop to look it up and clear that.
Right.
And then there's no way to learn effectively if you pass words that you don't understand.
Right.
And so most people don't study the right way. They don't know how to study. If they do, they don't take the time because it takes extra time to do that.
Right.
And when I figured that out, it changed everything for me. I started realizing about the relationship with God. That's the important part, right?
Right.
And so we got to put and it says in the Bible, you got to put on your armor. You got to be and have your sword, and that's the word of God, right? So because then you can see the people that are the charlatans, the
wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah, and the false prophets, right?
Right.
So, all right, man. Let me get into this again. I got so much to talk about with this. All right. So, how did it start affecting your life when you started to buy into it?
Wow. I would say it really started affecting my life even before I bought into it because I had to go along because my wife did. So cult leaders control their members through isolation, paranoia, and secrecy, along with shame and guilt. So we became very isolated because, only Uncle Robert knew the true gospel. And he also taught that, Jews are out to control the world. So, of course, all the Jews are monitoring his phone calls. So we couldn't say certain things on the phone, et cetera, et cetera. So even while I thought he was kind of nuts, we then became more and more isolated. When I say we, my family, so my wife and I, my kids, and then, of course, my in-laws, to where then we kind of got cut off from the greater, let's say body of Christ, from other believers. So even while I'm still a little bit like, okay, he's a brilliant man, but he's still a little crazy, we are now becoming further and further isolated from other people, which then that means he's the only voice we're hearing.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
It's the plan, and that's a dangerous place to be.
So anybody that's getting in a situation that somebody's not willing to answer questions and face questioning, the truth is not really spoken or cared about, and or they try to shut you off from absorbing any other information, that should be a red flag.
Huge red flag. I always tell people the truth doesn't mind to be questioned, right? Like you can ask me anything about my faith. I may not have the answer, and I'm not going to get stressed about it. I'll say, that's a good question. I don't know. I'll try and find out. But I would never try and hide or shy away from questions. And Uncle Robert, that's what we called him, his real name was Robert Booty. He hated being questioned. If you have the truth behind you, you'll welcome questions because then it's an opportunity to clear up the air, right? To get rid of any doubt or things that are not understood correctly. And then, yes, the information or milieu control is another red flag that people that study cults talk about, that when you cut off the information coming in so that it only comes in from one person, that's a danger. Yeah, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, and when you dissent or you have a counter argument, you become an enemy versus
And then, yep.
being able to communicate back and forth and have a conversation.
You become an enemy, and when you're an enemy, when you're in your own household, because I don't know at what point my wife at the time would have seen me as an enemy. She sees me now as an enemy, and we're not married. But certainly I became diminished in her eyes every time I would ask a question. And by the way, C-Rock, I would never get a good answer to the question. I would always get, Peter, why are you so stupid that you don't understand me? In other words, like gaslighting, to the nth degree. It was never, well, I will explain my crazy theology or ideology to you and try and help you understand. It was, why don't you understand? Why are you so dumb?
And you have external family as well, where you cut off from them, or did you cut yourself? I should say it's your responsibility. But did you cut yourself off from your outside family?
I didn't. It's a great question. So my wife was one of 5 kids. So am I. She cut off, along with her parents, 3 of their siblings, to the point it was vicious. I mean, they were vilified. We weren't allowed to say their names. The one sister was called Redhead because we didn't want to repeat her name around the kids. And that was all from Uncle Robert. It was all through his control. You were either with him or you were the enemy, as you said. And with my family, they're spread out around the country. And they all kind of knew about this weird Uncle Robert guy, but they had no idea what was going on. Because again, we lived in Idaho and Montana. They're in California, North Carolina, and Wisconsin. So I kind of kept them in the dark on purpose because I knew if they started asking questions, well, then my wife would find out, she'd be upset, and now I would be confronted with, Peter, you need to either cut off your parents or your brother, or we have a problem. And so I tried to avoid that because I wasn't about to cut off my family.
Yeah, right. That's good. That part's good. So
Yeah.
So for a couple years in, you started buying in. Were you expected to disseminate the information?
No, another good question. We were not out there trying to proselytize and bring other people in. It was more along the lines of Uncle Robert trying to really solidify his control over our tiny little group, or a micro cult, whatever you want to call it. So we weren't out trying to spread the news, because what we would often hear is, don't throw your pearls before the swine. It's in, the Sermon on the Mount, and Christ is talking. And Uncle Robert, and then my wife and in-laws, pretty much the rest of the world was swine because they wouldn't get it. And anybody that you would share this to, like if I shared it with you 10 years ago, and you would have been like, Peter, this is nuts. Well, then you became a threat, and it was my fault for letting you know about his theology, because now with you and your doubts, you're a threat to Uncle Robert.
Yeah, well, that's the wrong way to go if you're trying to grow the cult. He might have been happy with staying small, because if you're trying to grow it, you got to disseminate, and then you create, and this is in business, by the way. Like in business, you got to promote your business, right? And you create messaging that works, and you create answers to questions that you're going to get that make sense, that can be logically understood by people that you're speaking to about it. So he went around about that the wrong way. He wasn't a perfect cult leader.
He wasn't. Yeah, and he wasn't looking to grow it. It was more like circle the wagons, right? And the guy that you interviewed just recently, Stephen Hassan, Dr. Stephen Hassan, who wrote that really good book that helped me, Combating Cult Mind Control. He said one of the biggest differences between, let's say, 21st century and when he was in the cult back in, I think, in the 70s or 80s, is that you have the rise of these mini cults. And that was me. And I remember somebody sent me Stephen Hassan's book, Combating Cult Mind Control. It was anonymous. And I thought, oh, come on. It was after my wife had left me and I'd recovered. I was out of the cult and I recognized it. But I didn't think it was a cult. And somebody sent me the book, and I thought...
Even at that moment after you separated from your wife and you were out, you didn't realize? Oh, wow.
It was about a year later, and I thought, well, Uncle Robert was weird and he was wrong, but it wasn't a cult. And then I read Stephen Hassan's book, and I'm highlighting like half of it. And I'm like, holy smokes, this is a cult. Like, I didn't want to say it was a cult. But I look back now, there's no question that it was a cult. Yeah. And so there's a lot of these little small micro cults roaming around. And remember, C-Rock, I was on ESPN. I was on CBS. I was on Fox. I was on OLN, a lot of networks as a sports broadcaster. It's not like I'm hiding in like the backwoods of West Virginia or the northern Idaho, and no one knew what was going on with me.
And so you didn't have an awakening prior to the divorce then. I was thinking that that's what happened and that's why the marriage didn't work out.
No,
So,
the only awakening I had would have been shortly after 9/11. So I grew up in New Jersey, and I had high school classmates in the Twin Towers. I had a high school classmate who was widowed on 9/11. So 9/11 was kind of a big deal to me. It hits close to home. And shortly thereafter, we were having a conference, and I had never heard about his, kind of theology about, the Jews are out to kind of control the world and everything's a Jewish conspiracy. And he said on 9/11 that Roosevelt was a Jew and Truman was a Jew and 86,000 people died on that. And I thought, wow, like it was dark. I was literally scared. I'd first ever heard of this. And I remember I told my wife, this is probably like 2002 maybe. I said, I don't think this guy is who you think he is. And I don't think we should have anything to do with him. And I didn't follow up. She listened. She was concerned. But I never pressed the issue. And I never said, hey, we either got to get rid of him or it's either him or me. She probably would have left me back then. She didn't leave me till 17 years later because I was never pure enough, never devoted enough to Uncle Robert. She thought I was a fraud and a non-Christian because that's what he was telling her.
wow, man. Wow. All right.
And I can
So,
and I can give you two stories, C-Rock, that again, when you think about what's so bad about brainwashing and how bad could it have been? Let me tell you two quick stories. I had a wedding band and I lost it. So couldn't find it. Finally, after a couple months, bought a new one. 10 years later, I find the original wedding band. And our relationship's getting a little rocky at this point. So I've got two wedding bands. And lo and behold, at that time, Uncle Robert had lost his. So my wife wanted me to send that extra wedding band to him. And I did. So here he is. He's wearing my wedding band because she wanted him to wear it. Okay, let's go about 2 years later. We've been married like 17 years, 18 years. We had 5 kids. And we had talked about having a 6th. So we go out on a date. She gets all dressed up. She looks beautiful. And she tells me of the desire to have another male child, but not with me. Uncle Robert had 2 sons and granddaughters, no grandsons. And she was determined to preserve his precious bloodline and wanted to be a surrogate and provide him with a male grandson. And I was repulsed by the idea. And thankfully, it didn't happen. But that just shows you the depth of her brainwashing, how devoted she was.
wow. When that stuff happens, a lot of times we take a hit as men to our ego, to our pride. It's like, but it's not us. It's not the fact that we're not enough or not good enough or worthy
Right.
enough. But we still like naturally, for some reason, we take this hit like that. That could be something wrong with me.
Right.
And then we get
Right.
embarrassed by it, but we're not embarrassed for her. She's the one that's like the one we should be embarrassed for, if at all.
Right.
But like for us, like, what are you talking about? Right. Yeah, man, I can
And
empathize with that.
it's less
Just
along the lines of ego, and I know what you're getting at, but to me, it goes deeper than that. It's just a lack of respect. We, as the Bible tells us, we love our wives, and wives are supposed to respect their husbands. Well, if your wife wants to give your wedding band to another man, or be a surrogate and provide a grandson for another man, that's profound disrespect on me. And it got
100%.
worse. Yeah, it even got worse than that.
How?
How?
Yeah.
Oh,
How?
yeah, okay. So then she left me, and I was devastated. I never wanted a divorce. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I was never suicidal, but I was a wreck. And then she started to tell our 5 children that I was the devil, that I was Satan and a fraud and a liar. And then she started to tell the children that I was merely a bloodline and a sperm donor, and that I wasn't really a true father because I was so horrific and had no parental qualities whatsoever. I was just a bloodline and a sperm donor. And my kids are absorbing this. And I thought, wait a minute. 2 years ago, you wanted to be a surrogate to provide a male grandson because Uncle Robert's bloodline is so precious. But now you're using that as a pejorative to denigrate me. And that was kind of my first light bulb moment. That is wicked.
Yeah. How did you combat that with the kids?
Well, it took a while. Again, I was really defenseless. I mean, I was a shadow of a man. I was walking on eggshells. I was terrified of her. I was terrified of her, terrified of Uncle Robert. He had caused me to doubt my faith at the time. And it was really my friends and family. So when I finally told my family that my wife had left me and kids think I'm the devil, they, of course, saw the problem right away. immediately recognized Uncle Robert's the problem, not the solution. And so they were the ones that helped me get back on my feet. So when I tell people, the Lord opened my eyes and ears to the truth that I was in a cult, he did it through my friends and family because they saw it right away. So they were very kind, very loving, very patient with me as we would talk, and they would email me, and they came and visited me.
So, Peter, we were touching on the relationship with your kids, and how's the relationship nowadays?
It's a mixed bag. So, the courts got involved. Last thing I want is for the courts to get involved, but they did. We got what's called a guardian ad litem. Court hires usually an attorney or a counselor, and they kind of look after the best interests of the children in a high conflict divorce. So that's what we had. So the guardian ad litem immediately saw cult influence, horrific parental alienation, which is where one parent tries to alienate the kids from the other. And she's calling me a sperm donor and a bloodline of the devil. So they got involved. So the three youngest kids, we have 5, were sent back to me. So they lived with me full time for the last 7 years. And their mother, unfortunately, had supervised visits. So they're no longer part of the cult. But, they were taught so intensely to hate me that it's going to take a while for all that damage to be undone. So with some of them, I don't have much relationship with all. With some of the ones, I have a great relationship.
Right. I got it. Yeah, it's a sensitive situation, and I've witnessed my mom getting married 3 times, my dad twice. Step parents. I've seen it all. Been in the court system as far as the child psychologist, seeing if I was mature enough at 10 years old to decide who I wanted to live with. All kinds of stuff. And so I'm very familiar with that. Not the cult part, but so I have a question on the cult part. So aren't we all in the United States, if we watch the media, aren't we kind of being brainwashed?
Great question. And to me, that kind of alludes to, what is a cult, right? And so to kind of answer your question, I'll say this. To me, there's a difference between a true cult and like really dysfunctional, unhealthy culture. So like some people like Stephen Hassett, the author who's a cult expert, he's a great guy, a great cult expert, but I disagree with him with his book, The Cult of Trump. I don't think MAGA followers are a cult. Is there a lot of dysfunction there? Well, sure there is, as there is in every human endeavor. Whereas a cult, it's a very different specific definition. Are we all being brainwashed? That's a bit of a strong word as well. I don't know if I would go that far. But if you have a very narrow filter, let's say, of information that you, C-Rock, are listening to, and it's very narrow and only comes from, let's say, 1 or 2 people, well, maybe. Yeah, you might be.
Or one network, maybe.
That's a strong word.
Or one network. I said one network, right? Yeah.
Right.
I try to only watch ESPN.
There you go.
Yeah, I try to stick with that.
Problem.
Yeah, but no, I even mix it up there. I listen to Fox Sports and all those different ones. But yeah, all right. So, man, I guess the question now I have is like, where are you going from here? Like, what's the mission?
Yeah, I would. I'll say it this way. There's a great story in Luke chapter 8. So, Christ would talk in parables. There were stories. He would get his point across with stories. And there's a guy in Luke chapter 8 that was demon possessed. He's living out in a cave outside of town. And Christ heals him. He's in his right mind now. And he begs Christ, can I go with you? I'm paraphrasing. And Christ says, no, I got something more important for you. I want you to go home and tell your family and friends what the Lord has done for you. Right? That's what we do. That's what I do. This is what the Lord has done for me. I was in a cult. It nearly destroyed my life, turned it upside down. And I recovered. And I'm 1,000,000 times stronger now. And I'm 1,000,000 times stronger, C-Rock, because I don't walk around on eggshells with a wife that I'm afraid of, or with a family guru that I'm afraid of and intimidated by. And I don't have to go to a priest or a pastor or anybody else for wisdom. James chapter 1 says, listen, if you want wisdom, ask the Lord, he'll give it to you. And I do, and he has. And that's not arrogant. He has given me wisdom and discernment and energy and patience, etc. So I share my story, and some of the key lessons are, the biggest one is probably don't become cut off from the body of Christ. Don't allow yourself to become isolated, because that's when you're most vulnerable. So I wrote my book, and I go on podcasts to share that story, and in addition to the life lessons in my novels. But really, it's about getting that message out, telling my story.
Yeah, and not only that, not to isolate yourself, but not take the focus off of Jesus, because at the end of the day, there's also the story of Peter on the water. And when he took his focus off Jesus, he started to sink.
Right.
And as long as he stayed focused on him, he was able to walk across the water. So there's so many great lessons in the Bible, man. It's just crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So did you have a moment when you were coming out of it, where you were questioning God, and then like, was your faith tested for a period of time, and you had to redevelop this faith in the Bible? Or did you have a moment where you were like, yeah, maybe I don't look at that right now because it reminds me and triggers me?
Wow, great question. I'll say this. I certainly doubted my faith. I never doubted the Lord. I never doubted the Word of God. I never doubted what Christ has done for me. But I kept getting beat into my head over and over by this wicked little narcissist that I had a legion of demons in me. I was demonic. I was incapable of receiving salvation. I kept hearing this over and over for months when I was at my low point. So if there's any doubt, it was about me rather than the Lord. Then as I recovered, I realized, well, no, it was this wicked man spouting lies. And the Lord had never left me. I lost my marriage. I lost my family, but I never lost my faith. And I remember I would read the Psalms. And, you read the Psalms and David is crying out, like, here's King David. And he's got all these human emotions, he's in stress, and he cries out to the Lord. And that's what I was doing. Even though I had this crazy guy in my ear telling me that the Lord wasn't listening to me, I knew he was. So deep down, underneath all of that spiritual abuse, I knew the Lord heard me. And so it was almost as if I was kind of walking around blindfolded for a while. And then the Lord ripped the blindfold off.
Love that. Yeah, you find a lot of times with cult leaders, eventually they get found out and they're doing some nefarious things, whether it's sexual abuse or money or something. Has this ever come to light for this gentleman, or is he still operating?
Well, that's one of the reasons I wrote my book, was to expose him. Oh, yeah, I wanted to expose him. You won't find anything on the internet on him. He's very cautious, but his name is Robert Boody, Boody. Feel free to look him up. You won't find anything on him. And he's very elderly now. He's in his probably early 80s. There was no sexual or physical abuse that I know of, and I really don't think there was. I was around my kids a lot. But, we all tithed to him, so we would all send our money to him, and he wasn't getting rich off of us. But you got a kick out of this. He called casinos the true churches in America. And he felt like, wherever he would go on a Sunday was a waste of time. But if you could go into a casino, you could be blessed by the Lord regardless of your success in life, which, of course, he wasn't very successful. And I go to casinos, and I see people worshiping money. I don't see people worshiping the Lord. And oh, by the way, every time I sent him a tithe check, which I did for years, he would email back and say, well, boy came in a great time because he was always broke. So was there financial abuse? A lot of financial nonsense, I'll say that.
What do you think the reason that he was doing this in the first place was?
And that kind of gets back to what was his why, right? Like if you're talking about Simon Sinek, know your why. Why was he doing this? And I struggle with answering that, but I'll say this. It takes a very strong, moral, disciplined, humble person to be surrounded by people that think you're the greatest, right? Like if C-Rock, if you had like 10 people around you that thought you walked on water, it takes a very strong person to say, wait, time out. That's not me. I'm a sinner just like you are. And that wasn't Robert. He loved the praise and he just soaked it in. And I think it got to his head.
Yeah, because it wasn't necessarily about growing. I think it was about growing and spreading the message because you really believed in it. It would be more about the growth and, hey, make sure everybody disseminates and all that, like I said earlier. So,
right.
Yeah, that's one thing for me. When I first started building my brand, I was feeling that feeling of like everybody would want to take selfies with me everywhere I'd go. The brand was building, and I'm just like, this doesn't feel right. And so now with what we're building now, I've expressed this all the time. I'm like, no, this is going to be about the group. I'll lead it, but I don't want to be put on a pedestal because I don't belong on a pedestal.
And all I need to know about you, C-Rock, is in the last 45 seconds of what you just said, I'm not worried about you because I'll tell this story. Uncle Robert would tell the story of when he was a little child and he disobeyed his father and he threw the rock from the slingshot inappropriately and accidentally killed the family lamb, right? The family goat, whatever. And he would tell that story as if it was like 9/11, Pearl Harbor, right? This seminal moment in human history. And he also claimed it was the only time he ever sinned. So when you get somebody like that, like, well, then what do you need a savior for, right?
Wow.
That shows you the level of narcissism.
And so as we wrap up here, the book, Can you name the book again? Because I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, that's okay. Stop the Tall Man, Save the Tiger. It's my journey in and out of a tiny but destructive religious cult. It's available on Amazon, anywhere else online, Barnes & Noble.
Okay. And where did the title come from? How did you develop the title?
The title, I literally get goosebumps every time I talk about it. My former wife, Paige, was given a dream, I believe, by the Lord that clearly warned her about this guy, Uncle Robert, who was not who she thought he was. And I'm 6'5", and I was the tall man that came into her life. But Uncle Robert was able to twist that dream on its head, made himself the hero, and then solidified his control over my former wife, Paige. And that control and manipulation on his part still reverberates to this day, 27 years later.
Well, guys, go get the book. Go, you're going to hear a lot more stories and in more detail we couldn't cover today. Peter, thank you so much for being here and spending the time with us today. And thank you for your vulnerability to share this, because I mean, it's got to feel at some point as you're going through this a little bit of embarrassment, obviously. I mean, it's just like, how could that happen to me? Right. Because I can think of some of the things I went through in my life. And I'm like, right. So I appreciate the vulnerability to going out there and sharing so that you can impact lives. It means the world, man.
Yeah, you bet. And at this point, really, it's not even so much vulnerability or people call me, courageous and all that. I've already been through it. I've already experienced the pain. Let's use it for good.
Yeah, love it. All right, man. Well, hang tight while I wrap this up, folks. That's this episode of That One Podcast with your boy C-Rock and our friend Peter Young, who wrote the book about the cult that he experienced. Until next time, make sure you subscribe or follow the podcast at the top of your favorite podcast platform. Keep coming back and also be that one.